Hey guys, what's up? It's Cory Allen with ITS Freshwater Muskie Fishing. We're going to do a little bit of live bait fishing. We covered some stuff with Joe Murphy back in the fall, and he showed me some stuff I hadn't tried before, because a lot of times guys that live bait fish, what they're doing is they're simply just, you know, dragging out the side of the boat, just letting it hang as they fish. We're going to do some of this set it and forget it stuff. This is one of his STFF rigs. If you don't get it, ask. And these are really well designed. These are really stout. He actually uses a circle hook, which is something not a lot of the sucker rigs use. Actually gives it kind of a center point for direction, hooks it onto the fish, keeps the bait on really well, but it's also pulling it from that front, so it's not going to drown them, because a lot of times when they're hooked onto the side only, when it starts pulling tension against the fish actually kind of gets pulled to the side. It drowns. So this gives you the same advantage of a normal circle hook or quick strike rig. See how the hooks are bent so you can put them into the trout. But then you also use, or anything you're using, we're using trout today, suckers. Use the circle hook to put it through their nose, keeps the tension in the front, and then basically what you do is you hook these into the sides, the little bent hooks. Those are used to push down into the flesh, so it puts the hooks flush against the body. So if you can imagine this is the fish, you'll see in a second. Put it in, holds like that. And then what we're going to do, so we actually have some weight down, but it gives the fish some autonomy, we just really basically put a 2-ounce, 3-ounce sinker in the front. It's just going to be a slip swivel, or it's just going to be a slip weight, so it's not going to be attached to it. It's just going to slide up and down. So that gives the fish some leeway. So we can let it hit the bottom, the weight will hit the bottom and keep the line down, but then the fish will be somewhat free to kind of roam about the cabin, swim a little bit, but he won't be able to come all the way to the surface. We'll be able to control him from that 3-ounce weight point. Wherever we place it, the fish will have to work off of that, but he won't be totally inhibited from moving. I thought it was pretty cool. So we're going to get this thing rigged up. We're going to put it out. Joe Murphy sucker rigs. They're pretty good. You've all heard the story, but don't ignore it. A lot of walleye guys, crappie guys, bass guys, all times of year, especially in the spring, they hook some really big fish and they catch some really big fish on really tiny stuff. So we're going two ends of the spectrum. We're going to use some like 12 to 18 inch live bait. We're also going to use some like 12 to 18 millimeter live bait. We picked up some Tuffy shiners, a little bit smaller than the shad. The big ones are going to be about 4 inches long. So there's really not rocket science to this. The biggest thing you want to consider though is, like, we're going to use about 1 ounce weight on an egg sinker to keep it down like a Carolina rig. This is something I've pre-rigged to put different baits on, flies and stuff, so it works in that capacity. But the big thing is you want to use a really light wire leader, because you are using smaller bait. You don't want it to have any kind of inhibition where like it's going to be so thick the fish can't move, because a lot of times those heavy wire leaders are going to be so heavy inherently that the bait's not going to be able to move. But this is some AFW 35, it's 40-pound test, 7-strand wire. Really easy to tie, really easy to make up. It's really super durable. And you can see it's really, 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 really supple. So that's really not going to inhibit the live bait much at all. I like to use the little snap. You can tie directly, but I like the little snap so you can actually just kind of change it out at will. We're using some really small but stout Gamakatsu, owner hooks, the little octopus snell hooks. So let me see here. So this isn't anything too complicated. You want to get enough of a stout hook in. You want the fish to be able to swim. I don't like to do it through the eyes because that kills them pretty quick. So now you've just got right through that little nose. It's exactly how we're going to hook the big bait. But these are so small that literally when you take these, they're going to be able to eat the whole thing. So you don't have to have little side hooks on it like a big quick strike rig. But here, drop it down on the water. You can kind of see once the fish gets its bearings, he's not too inhibited, just moving around. And the cool thing is you can set your depth with that Carolina rig weight, but then the fish is kind of free to roam about. So there's some more active ways to fish this. I know a lot of guys, you know, when they hook into these fish, what they're doing is they're actually using them tipped on crappie jigs. That's cool. That's a more active way of fishing, but kind of the way I like to do it is you can either do this or like a 3-way swivel rig. You can put the weight on the bottom. We'll do that a little bit later. I like that for drifting. So the weight ticks the bottom first, and then the shad's hanging above it off of that leader and the current's pulling it out. But since we're in a still water environment right now, just kind of give them that little 18-inch, 24-inch leader leash, and we just drop it down and let it set. And this is basically just kind of like vertical jigging, where you don't have to jig because the jig jigs itself because it's live bait. So, but keep in mind too, like all times of year especially in the springtime, don't neglect tiny small bait like that. It doesn't take much to amp up your tackle so you can handle a big fish on it. But you would be amazed how many times that they're going to take that before they'll take anything else. Well, the big thing is, like, what you're going to do is you're going to drop it down. And you're going to let the weight hit the bottom. So once the weight hits the bottom, you know that there's this much of a leader off of it with the shad. So what I like to do is maybe raise it maybe 12 inches off the bottom of that, so you're not constantly dragging it, because the shad's, the little toughy minnow, he's not going to be as vigorous as keeping up off the bottom. So you want to kind of keep him up just a bit. You want to keep him in level with that weight, because he's always going to be working off of that weight where it's set at. So I'd let it hit the bottom, raise it up maybe 12 inches, and then just set it. And just kind of watch your graph when you're going, and you'll see if you're going to rise a little bit. But you always want to keep it just slightly off the bottom, so it's just kind of tracking along, so it's level with that weight, and then the shad can kind of move about. But that's a big thing though. Like, as much as they'll hit minnow tip jigs and stuff, I like it when you have just the minnow on a small hook and you have it able to kind of move on its own devices. Like when you have it hooked on the crappie jig and you're just vertically up and down, it's kicking, it's moving, but it's kind of stuck in that place. Like, it can't really roam about. You're doing this. It's an effective way to fish for a lot of species, but when we're doing this specifically and we're using the small live bait, I like to do the same thing they do with the bigger live bait. Give them a little bit of a leash, just adapt your tactics and your tackle so it's a little bit lighter so they can still move about, and then you got it. So, and the cool thing about this is too, you can do this while you're doing other things, and we'll do that a little bit too. You can cast an area, you can fish an area, you can jig, you can do all kinds of things as well while you're doing this, and it doesn't hurt to have that hanging off the side. The more you know. And while we're on the topic, it's a good time to talk about this. So we're talking about using really light baits, really small live bait, really nerfed down stuff that's still tough enough to take a muskie, but it doesn't inhibit what you're trying to do with a small bait. So this is a tooth tamer muskie spinning rod, like you heard me right. This is a muskie spinning rod. And I'll tell you, in the past, I've always had to look for saltwater inshore to find something that's comparable where it can handle big fish, but allow me to throw really small things and work things with finesse. This is really the first time I've found a rod that I can throw things down to a 1/4 ounce or even less, and it's still got this huge butt. This is designed for muskie fishing. It can handle a little bit heavier baits too. This is it's the 8-foot medium heavy. But I like using this for the smaller stuff, so like X-wraps, hair flies, jigs, stuff like that. But especially for this kind of thing too, you're using this small live bait, having a little bit more of a supple tip and having the spinning rod, and when we want to cast it out, we can use it a little bit more effectively to throw the bait without having to really damage the bait, because you can kind of just pitch it a little bit easier. It's not like having to put as much force into it. This thing will throw stuff down to a 1/2 ounce a country mile. I know it's rated for 1.5 ounces. It does things down to 0.5 ounces really well. So this is a rod you should check out, especially if you're looking for a spinning rod to add to your muskie arsenal. I would specifically look at these. It is incredibly light. It has the largest butt I've seen on a muskie spinning rod, or even some of these saltwater rods before they get to be so big that they're not useful in this capacity. And as you can see, you can just brace it like this. And it's incredibly stout too. It's got a really nice bend. It's not too whippy, it's not too snappy. It exerts the force, it distributes it well when you load up on a fish, and that's really good when you're using lighter baits too. You don't want something too stiff, because you want the hooks to pull into the bait, or to pull into the fish. Especially when you're using lighter baits, you'll set the drag a little bit lighter for the smaller hooks, but you want more constant tension than just sheer raw snap force when you're trying to drive the hook in, because those hooks are smaller, they've got little needle points, and you just want them to pull constant tension in instead of having to drive them in like the bigger muskie hooks. And you'll see that when we do a bigger live bait rig and we set the hook, the terminology is, Joe said it, you're literally trying to break the rod. Sometimes that even happens when you're doing it. But with these, you just want a slow, steady pull. You just want to exert constant force and pressure on that, so it'll pull the needle hooks in, and so they drive in, because once you get those little hooks in, they're actually going to be a lot harder for the fish to shake than a big hook. Even with the bigger barbs and everything like that, the small needle hooks, you have a lighter drag, you got a more supple rod with a supple tip, even though it's stout. And it's going to be able to allow you to exert that constant force balanced with your drag that's going to maintain pressure on the fish without compromising your tackle, and it's going to make sure that the point of the hook stays in.
Cory likes big butts, and he
cannot lie. Especially muskie fishing, it makes a big difference. Just not even having because most spinning rods, they'll stop like right there. Even some of the surf ones I've used, but like this thing is huge. And I know, especially when I've worked jerk baits with it and stuff, just being able to kind of slap the bass, so to speak, like you've got it tucked in, you get to use the same motion you do with a heavy rod. Yeah, exactly. You have to use the same motion you do with the heavy rods, where you can tuck it in under your arm and work it like this, but then a spinning rod, which comes in really handy. And it is incredibly light. I was floored at how light this rod was.
Back that bass up.
Yeah, check these out. Well, just for the record, when you get one of these Joe Murphy STFF sucker rigs, you might think I actually just tied this off. These actually come with this wire leader, and he's spaced it out so it's like for optimal length away from the blades, or away from the hooks. Comes with some really good cross-lock snaps. He's got everything kind of placed to where you need it. So you got that circle hook in the front. You've got shrink wrap rubber and these two hooks. And then you've got about a given, it's about 24-inch leader, I think is what it is. And that's perfect too, because when I want to do a drop sinker on it, to give it that's a perfect amount to have like as it stops, because it's not going all the way down to this. It's not only going down to the hook whenever we pull on it, it's going to stop right there inherently. So it's nothing too fancy. You can do some fancier rigging, but for today, we want to give them a little bit of a leash. There's really not a better way to do that than just to put a weight right in front of that before you tie it. And then you'll have that as a constant base point, and you can let it go. Now, you can use pyramid sinkers, you can use all kinds of sinkers. I like the little round sinkers because they're heavy, but they also don't like glue to the bottom. They can move a little bit, so if the fish gets really antsy, he's kind of free to do that. Because a lot of times that's what's going to trigger your strike. Is if you have a fish that's on a fish and he starts to struggle, you want him to be able to move a little bit. You want to be able to push this a little bit. If you have a really heavy pyramid sinker or something where he's glued to the bottom, he's going to be able to move a little bit, but he's not going to be able to jump around quite as much. He'll be pulling line out, but he won't be able to activate off the bottom like he would like to normally. He won't be able to jump up and such, but he can move this. If he really wants to, he can move this. He can roll it on the bottom, but it's not going to be a total anchor point. That's the number one.
With a real STFF bait, please.
Come here. Come here. Trout are notoriously frisky. Okay, now you got him like that. Okay. Now he's stuck. He ain't going nowhere. Here's the point where you want to hold him. This is actually a little bit trickier with the trout because they're so slimy. Got him stuck like this. I'm going to take those points like that. Peel away some of the scales so you get a clean cut. You don't want to go in too deep. Just push it past the barb like that. Got him hooked on that side. Kind of got a little bit of a trigger there. I'm going to do it on this side. Bring it down just a bit. Ooh, you moving. That's the thing, you don't want to go too deep. No. See how he's hooked? Give him a sec, he'll get his bearings. Oh, come on. And that's the big reason you take those hooks like that on the side where they don't go in too deep. He's in a little bit of shock right now, but they come out of it. Just let him get some breath. Come on. That's pretty much the same too for the suckers and the trout. Pretty much any live bait like that that's larger. You put that first hook right through the nose. Because you don't want them to get into a point to where they're going to get mangled or hurt. It's going to really compromise body too much. You just want those prosthetics in there so when something grabs it, they get it. All right. Now we're going to set it and forget it.
Is he alive and kicking?
He's alive and kicking. You can kind of see too, that's a really big thing too, to have that little point in the front. And the circle hook, like Joe said, it actually will help them get hooked at times. But the biggest thing about it is, I'm going to actually push that through just a little bit more just so he's got a better angle on it. The biggest thing is it's putting all the force of that rig forward. So if you've got him just hooked on the side, there's a lot of sucker rigs too that would like, they'll just have those side hooks in the body. So when any kind of pressure exerts against the trout or whatever you're using, sucker, it's going to drag the fish like this. But when you put it through the nose like that, what happens is you can see all that tension is being placed first on that nose hook. Chill out. You can see he's frisky now. You just put him right through the nostrils. I'll tell you what, let's give this guy a wing. Make sure he's good. The big thing you don't want to do with live bait, you don't want to throw it too hard. Just want to kind of lob it. I'm going to give him some line. Let it sink down. Let the weight hit the bottom. Now the big thing we want to do, give him just a little bit of slack. Not much, but just a little bit. I'll watch him in this rod holder. So like I said, it's kind of a lot like catfishing. In a way. You want to constantly give them just a little bit of leeway. The cool thing about those rigs too is like you can let the fish take it a little bit. Not too much. But once you realize that it's there, you're going to be able to get a hook set immediately. And probably your biggest problem at this point is making sure the boat stays steady. Or you're doing other things. Now Joe likes to anchor. In this situation, I don't really want to anchor. Kind of want to just kind of keep a little bit of motion going through so we can cover the rest of this area. And then give him just a little bit of slack. So it requires a little bit of maintenance. Not a lot. Other things too. It's not quite a set it and forget it as like if you just hang it off the side. But you want to provide a little bit of maintenance. You don't want to be dragging him on the bottom. You want to give him enough slack too. Enough of a loose tension on your bait clicker and stuff that he can move around and pull it if he wants. But the big thing is you just want him to kind of stay in that general area. That's why we put the little slip sinker on. 3 ounces, so it's keeping the whole rig down. Like the fish has got to work off that point. If you put like a ½ ounce sinker on it, he probably wouldn't even feel it. He would just swim around with it. He'll move it wherever. 3 ounces, he's not going to be able to just pick it up off the bottom. But if you had a Carolina rig, like we use with some of them, what will happen is that weight is statically attached to the length it's attached to the bait. So he's got to drag that around to move around. You don't want that. You want to have that anchor point, but you want to have him have the liberty to be able to move a little bit freely. So if he can pull the line through the weight, as it slides up and down, he can move a little bit in that general vicinity. He's not going to be able to move it too far from that point. He's always going to have to come back to the center, excuse me. But, like I said, if he had the Carolina rig, he wouldn't be as free to move around. He would be kind of be glued to the bottom, literally. But now, he's kind of just got a starting point where he's got to stick to the bottom, but then he can kind of move about as he so chooses. And you've kind of got that point to work off of where that bait is. And it gives you the freedom, too, that like if you do have a fish pick it up, you know, he's just kind of messing with it. If there's a weight attached directly to the bait, he's going to feel that weight too, and sometimes that might discourage him. But if you have the weight attached like this, where it slides up and down, but it's still glued to the bottom, then you'll be able to give him a little bit more slack. They won't feel as impeded from it, because these bigger baits too, like, they don't just usually attack them like they do our baits where they strike. They'll grab them, and then traditionally what they would do is they'd go somewhere, they'd swim off, they'd turn it to the side, and they'd eat it. That's where the quick strike rig comes in, because you don't have to wait for them to do that. Once they grab it sideways, you can set the hook. But still, they're going to mouth it a little bit sometimes. They're just going to kind of mess with it, play with it. And if they feel that tension sometimes, it's going to discourage them. So you want to have that little bit of an anchor point on the bottom that it has to work off of, but you don't want them glued statically to it. So you can give them slack off of that as you so choose. Pretty, like in warm water, it's a different story. In cold water, trout are probably your hardiest live bait. Like they really say, like, this guy's really frisky. Look, look, look. I'm pulling him up right now. Look at him. He's fighting me. He's just fighting me. Just check on him. Yeah, I got some weaves on him, little shit. Yeah, see, he was mulling around the bottom. We'll get those leaves off here in a second. You can see, I mean, he's moving pretty good. All right, so now we've anchored and fished with this guy a little bit. He's frisky. He's good to go. And here's what we've done. We're gonna do a little bit more drifting. So to keep him down, I made a little three-way swivel rig with wire. Do adjustable depth. I want to keep him enough off the bottom that he's not like constantly trying to drag it. So put a snap on the end so I can adjust the weight. Right now I've got a 3-ounce weight, so what I'll do is I'll lower that down until I feel that hit. It's just like a bigger version of the rig we were using earlier. You can see the trout still on the rig. So he's going to still be free to roam around somewhat. There's the weight on the bottom. So that's not the trout hitting the bottom, that's the weight that's about 2 feet above where the trout's tied. So now what we're going to do is keep it taut. We're going to loosen up our drag considerably. Because now if a fish grabs it, he's not going to have the privilege of being on that free swinging weight. So we want there to be some tension against it because we want the trout to come with us. But if a fish grabs it, we don't want to do it so much that he's disengaged from it. So let him chill a minute.
Here he comes, right here. What's on that?
No, it's not a fish yet.
Trout?
That's the trout.
Oh, okay.
That's still the trout. Something's on his ass.
I love it when you're trolling stripers, gizzards, and they come and bust them out of the water.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Whatever it is keeps fucking with it. Look.
Yeah.
That's a muskie.
It is a muskie?
That's a muskie. Nothing else will do that.
Okay. They're being real sluggish, probably.
Look at him swimming along right with it.
Yeah. Every time it comes up, he gets antsy, see?
Yep. There's something pushing him on the bottom. Trout goes wild when it comes up. That's a fish. Wild how slow they are.
Oh, they're real.
They're just picky as shit.
They're lazy. Yeah. So you can see we're back here. We've got two kinds of live bait out. One big, one small. We're vertical jigging. We've had multiple fish come up and make the bait nervous. Multiple times, watched them on the graph. So sometimes it's what you got to deal with. So right now we've got these two baits out. I'm just vertical jigging a rattle trap. Something small. To see if maybe we can get one to come over and look at this and just kind of nip it. If anything, being able to fish like this, watch the live bait on the graph, and watch fish come up on it. Now you can see my rattle trap down there too. I'm jigging underneath the boat. Shows you how much fish will just look at a bait, artificial or live bait, before they decide to do something, if anything at all. Sometimes you can use it to hold their attention when you throw down another presentation. Live bait's a valuable tool, but it's not magic by any stretch of the imagination.
Go.
Hey guys, I'll tell you what. We've tried live bait fishing through here. We've had a little bit of action, but nothing that's resulted in a hookup. So now we're going to try to use the current to our advantage and take some of these live bait tactics and adapt them into our drifts a little bit. So hopefully we'll be able to utilize that current to get these fish to be a little bit more aggressive. And we won't have to alter our rigs too much at all. We're just going to put things kind of behind the boat and just do controlled drifts using some of the same rigging. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with that.